The search for answers in the death of Nolan Wells has taken another unexpected turn. A newly released timeline report has raised fresh questions about what happened on Horn Island that July afternoon. According to the report, new photographs, additional witness possibilities, and a closer look at the sequence of events may challenge parts of the timeline many people thought they already understood. But do these new details actually change what happened, or do they simply reveal how much is still unknown? Before we continue, welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we're glad you found us. We bring you carefully researched stories, breaking developments, and thoughtful discussions that go beyond the headlines to explore the details that matter most. If you enjoy clear, fact-based storytelling and want to stay updated on cases like this, take a moment to subscribe and turn on notifications. That way, you'll never miss our latest investigations as new information becomes available. For weeks, one question has remained at the center of this case. Where was Nolan Wells during the critical hours before he disappeared? His body would later be found washed ashore near Horn Island, but the exact path that led to that tragic discovery remains the subject of intense debate. The newly compiled timeline doesn't claim to solve the mystery. Instead, it gathers photographs, videos, and witness material from people who were there that day in an effort to create a clearer picture of what happened. According to those who assembled it, the goal was not to conduct an official investigation, but to organize publicly submitted information into a single report that investigators and the public could examine. At first, that seemed straightforward. Then something unexpected happened. One photograph immediately stood out. It wasn't dramatic because of what it showed. It was important because of who might be in it. The image revealed several boats gathered together in the water, tied closely alongside one another. Some appeared anchored, others seemed connected side by side, creating what looked like a floating gathering of friends enjoying the holiday. People could be seen standing in the water, talking, relaxing, and moving between boats. On the surface, it looked like an ordinary summer afternoon. But another detail stood out. Every one of those boats may have carried potential witnesses. The report noted that Nolan had arrived at Horn Island on one of the boats visible in that area. Yet when investigators and commentators looked closely at the image, one question immediately emerged. Where was Nolan? If this photograph truly captured that point in the afternoon, why couldn't anyone confidently identify where he was standing? Was he on one of the boats? Was he already somewhere else on the island? Or had something happened before the picture was even taken? The report does not answer those questions, but it places them at the center of the discussion. The timing makes those questions even more important. According to the report, several of the photographs appear to have been taken sometime during the late afternoon. The exact timestamps remain uncertain because many of the images were submitted as screenshots rather than original files. That means investigators cannot rely solely on the visible timestamps. Instead, those compiling the report compared shadows, boat positions, and other visual clues to estimate when many of the photographs were likely captured. They stressed that these estimates are not definitive and should be treated carefully. That uncertainty matters. If a photograph was taken only minutes earlier or later than believed, it could completely change where Nolan should have been at that moment. One of the organizers explained that the public had been asked to submit anything they had from that day: photographs, videos, social media posts, anything that might help reconstruct the timeline. According to the report, dozens of people responded. None of those images were taken by the organization itself. They were all provided by individuals who hoped they might contribute something useful to the search for answers. That brings us to another detail many people overlooked: the water itself. Several photographs show people standing in water that reaches chest level or even higher. According to those discussing the report, Horn Island has an unusually steep underwater slope. A person can move from shallow water into much deeper water within only a few steps. Some observers noted that while many people appeared relaxed and were socializing, they were doing so in water that may have been considerably deeper than it first appeared. The report does not suggest that this alone explains Nolan's death, but it identifies the conditions as another important piece of context. As investigators and commentators examined the photographs, another possibility emerged. If every boat in those images could be identified through its registration number or name, then every boat owner could potentially identify who had been aboard that afternoon. That could significantly expand the pool of witnesses beyond the small group that has received most of the public attention. According to the discussion surrounding the report, many people who were on the island reportedly came forward voluntarily to speak with law enforcement. Whether every person visible in the photographs has already been interviewed remains unclear. Officials have not publicly confirmed exactly who has been questioned or what information those interviews may have produced. That uncertainty has fueled continuing public interest. People naturally want clear answers. Instead, they continue to find new questions. The timeline itself doesn't accuse anyone of wrongdoing. It doesn't claim to prove a crime occurred. It simply gathers pieces that were scattered across photographs, witness accounts, and social media into one place. Some pieces appear to fit together, others don't, and that may be the most significant development so far. Because before anyone can understand what happened to Nolan Wells, they first have to agree on something much simpler: exactly where everyone was, and exactly when they were there. Those two questions may determine whether this new timeline becomes an important investigative tool, or simply another chapter in a case that continues to leave more questions than answers. One of the biggest questions surrounding this case has never been whether people were on Horn Island that afternoon. Everyone agrees there were dozens of people enjoying the 4th of July. The real question is much simpler. Who saw Nolan Wells during the final hours before he disappeared? That question becomes much more important once the newly compiled timeline is examined closely. According to those who organized the report, they weren't trying to replace law enforcement's investigation. They openly stated that they simply collected photographs, videos, and social media posts submitted by members of the public and arranged them into what they believed was the most logical sequence of events. They repeatedly emphasized that investigators may already possess much of this information, but they believed organizing it into a single timeline could still prove helpful. But another detail stood out. Several photographs appear to place groups of people together in ways that had not received much public attention before. Boats were tied side by side. People moved between them. Some were standing waist-deep in the water, while others appeared farther out where the water reached their shoulders or even their necks. According to the discussion surrounding the report, that suggests there were many more people in the immediate area than most had realized. If that's true, then there could be many more eyewitnesses than originally believed. At first, the timeline seemed to support what many people already believed. Then another possible contradiction appeared. The report references a photograph that was reportedly taken at approximately 4:50 p.m. Central Time. In that image, there appears to be a young African-American male wearing blue swim trunks. Those compiling the report were careful not to identify him as Nolan Wells. In fact, they specifically stated they could not verify his identity. They included the photograph only because the individual generally matched Nolan's description and because the reported time of the image could be significant if it truly showed him still on Horn Island. That distinction is important. The report never claims the photograph proves Nolan was there. It simply asks investigators to examine it. If the person is Nolan, then the timing could affect the sequence of events. If it isn't Nolan, then the image can be ruled out, and investigators move forward. Either way, the photograph becomes another piece that deserves careful examination, rather than quick conclusions. That brings us to one of the most discussed parts of the timeline: the boats. According to those involved in compiling the report, every registered boat potentially provides another avenue for investigators. Registration numbers, vessel names, and ownership records could help identify who was present that afternoon. Boat owners may be able to confirm who boarded, who left, and who remained behind. Some people reportedly contacted authorities voluntarily after recognizing their own boats in publicly released photographs. Others may have already spoken with investigators. Officials, however, have not released a complete witness list, so it remains unclear exactly how many interviews have taken place or what information those witnesses may have provided. Then something unexpected happened. Attention shifted away from the boats and toward a young woman identified in public discussions only as Katie. Earlier accounts suggested Nolan had only just met her that afternoon. Some descriptions implied that neither Nolan's friends nor others at the gathering really knew who she was. But according to later reporting discussed during the program, that picture became less clear. Katie's sister reportedly stated that Katie believed Nolan was preparing to leave with his friends after speaking with her. According to her account, Katie assumed the friends calling Nolan over would not leave the island without him. She herself reportedly left on another boat, believing Nolan had safely returned with his group. That sounds straightforward. But there was another complication. According to the discussion, questions later emerged about whether members of Nolan's broader group actually knew who Katie was. Some commentary suggested there had been communication with her after Nolan disappeared, raising questions about earlier descriptions that portrayed her as simply some girl no one recognized. The exact nature of those communications has not been fully explained publicly, and the available information remains incomplete. Even so, the apparent inconsistency has become one of the most closely examined aspects of the timeline, because investigators often pay close attention whenever witness accounts appear to evolve over time. That would have been the end of it. But another question continued to surface. Which boat was Nolan actually supposed to return on? According to the discussion in the report, Nolan arrived on one vessel, commonly referred to as the Triton. Yet later conversations suggested he may not have intended to return to the mainland on that same boat. Instead, friends were reportedly spread across several different boats, anchored near one another throughout the afternoon. If that is accurate, then assumptions made during the early stages of the investigation may deserve another look. A witness believing Nolan planned to board one boat could easily misunderstand what happened if Nolan had intended to leave on another. The report does not answer that question. It simply highlights that the situation may have been more complicated than originally understood. As the afternoon moved toward evening, the timeline becomes less certain. Photographs grow scarcer. Witness recollections become more difficult to place in exact order. Small differences of only a few minutes begin to matter much more than they did earlier in the day. And somewhere within those missing moments lies the answer investigators have been searching for. Was Nolan seen after some believed he had already been left behind? Or are the photographs and memories simply creating the illusion of a timeline shift where none actually exists? Those are questions investigators continue to examine, and they lead directly into the next stage of this story, where conflicting accounts, unanswered forensic questions, and the official investigation begin to intersect. As investigators, journalists, and members of the public continued examining every available photograph and witness account, one thing became increasingly clear. The timeline itself had become one of the most important pieces of evidence. Not because it answered every question, because it showed exactly where the unanswered questions remained. According to those who assembled the report, every photograph, every social media post, and every witness statement was intended to create context. They acknowledged from the beginning that not every image could be fully verified, and that some timestamps might not reflect the original moment a picture was taken. Rather than presenting conclusions, they presented possibilities and encouraged investigators to either confirm or eliminate them through additional evidence. One photograph continued to receive particular attention. It reportedly showed an individual who might have matched Nolan's general appearance sometime after the boat, known as the Triton, had already departed the island. The people who compiled the report repeatedly cautioned that they could not verify the person's identity. They included the image because they believed it might help investigators establish whether Nolan remained on the island later than previously believed. During the discussion, however, not everyone agreed. Some observers said the individual simply didn't resemble Nolan. Others pointed out that image quality, lighting, and possible filtering made it difficult to reach any reliable conclusion. The consensus was not that the photograph solved anything, but that it deserved careful review before being dismissed. That careful approach reflects a broader theme running through the entire case. Small details matter. A shadow can suggest the time of day. A boat's registration number can identify its owner. A photograph taken from a different angle can reveal people who were overlooked before. Even an ordinary vacation snapshot can become significant months later when viewed alongside dozens of other images. According to the discussions surrounding the report, that's exactly how investigators often build timelines. They don't rely on one dramatic breakthrough. They compare hundreds of small details until a clearer picture begins to emerge. Another point, repeatedly emphasized, was the difference between public discussion and official investigation. While many people online have offered their own theories, the report itself avoids making accusations. Instead, it consistently distinguishes between verified facts, witness accounts, and information that still requires confirmation. That distinction is important because investigators often receive information that appears promising at first, but later proves unrelated. In this case, several commentators noted that conflicting statements do not automatically indicate wrongdoing. Memories fade. People experience stressful events differently. Individuals may remember the same afternoon in different ways, without anyone intentionally providing false information. Still, when accounts differ on important points, investigators naturally take a closer look. One of those points involves Katie. Public discussion surrounding her role has shifted over time. Early descriptions suggested she was simply someone Nolan met on Horn Island that day. Later reporting introduced additional questions about communication between members of Nolan's group and Katie after his disappearance. The available information does not fully explain those communications, and the report does not attempt to resolve every inconsistency. Instead, it presents them as issues investigators may continue to examine. The report also reminds viewers that the official investigation has continued largely outside public view. Many investigative steps have not been publicly released. Authorities have not disclosed every interview. They have not published every piece of evidence. According to the discussion, toxicology results and the complete autopsy findings had not yet been made public at the time of the broadcast. Reports also indicated that a grand jury was expected to review evidence connected to the case, though the outcome of that process had not yet been announced. For Nolan's family and those who cared about him, those unanswered questions are more than points on a timeline. They're part of a search for the truth. Every witness who comes forward, every photograph that is reviewed, every interview that is conducted, each one has the potential to clarify another piece of what happened that day on Horn Island. Whether the newly compiled timeline ultimately changes investigators' understanding of the case remains uncertain. It may simply confirm what authorities already know. It may identify witnesses who have already been interviewed, or it may encourage investigators to revisit details that had received less attention during the early stages of the investigation. At this point, the report itself does not claim to provide final answers. Instead, it argues that organizing the available evidence into one clear sequence may help reveal gaps that deserve closer examination. And perhaps that's the most important takeaway. The search for truth often moves forward, one small detail at a time. A photograph, a conversation, a timestamp, a witness who remembers something they didn't think mattered. Whether those pieces eventually fit together into a complete picture is something only the continuing investigation can determine. As always, it's important to remember that many questions in this case remain unanswered, and everyone discussed in connection with the investigation is presumed innocent, unless evidence proves otherwise. What do you think? Do you believe this newly assembled timeline raises important new questions, or does it simply organize information that investigators may have already examined? Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments below. If you enjoy thoughtful, fact-based discussions of developing cases like this one, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next investigation. Thank you for watching, and we'll continue following this story as new verified information becomes available.